Alright, the MAGA meltdown on Twitter continues as people realize that Donald Trump in fact is appointing neoconservatives to his new administration to act as puppets for his more radical advisors. For example, Dave Smith on Twitter just posted, "Marco Rubio is a disaster. Might as well give Liz Cheney, the State Department, awful sign." And the first response reads, "Literally made no sense for you to ever paint Trump as anti-establishment and anti-war. Hold this out." So many of the more libertarian Trump voters immediately realized Trump turned his back on them. Jackson Hinkle, with 3 million followers on Twitter, said, "Trump's deep state cabinet picks, all extreme Zionists, most want war with Russia, all want war with Iran, all hawkish on China, all want regime change in Latin America. What happened to no more neocons? Total MAGA betrayal." And even putting aside the content of this tweet, I mean, this dude is literally pro-Russia, pro-Iran, and pro-China. Of course we want to be pissing off Russia. They are our enemy. Even putting that aside, just the total MAGA betrayal part of it is hilarious because I don't know why they thought he was some anti-war, not war hawk mogul. I mean, Secular Talk, Kyle Klinsky just wrote this, and I think that we should all pay attention. He said, "Dear MAGA, I know many of you are upset at Trump's pro-war picks. You expected him to be anti-war. I hate to tell you, but your favorite independent media hosts were lying to you the entire time. Here's Trump's first term when it comes to foreign policy." Drop a like and subscribe, and let's jump into this. So, Kyle Klinsky writes, "Trump's first term, increased drone strikes by 432%, 2,243 drone strikes in his first 2 years alone, more than 8 years of Obama. He kept us in Iraq. He kept us in Afghanistan," which Biden pulled out of, by the way. Biden had the balls to get some egg on his face and pull us out of Afghanistan. A 330% increase in civilian deaths in Afghanistan over Trump's term. He bombed Syria twice. He bombed Somalia. He assassinated Soleimani. I'm sure we'll get to that. He occupied a third of Syria just to take the oil. He increased the military budget every single year. He let Israel illegally annex the Golan Heights, which is Syrian. He assassinated a top Iranian commander who was fighting ISIS. That is Soleimani right there. He tried to coup Venezuela. He ripped up the Iran agreement. He had his generals create a plan to evade Iran so that he could flex it to people like Kid Rock. He is the deep state. He is the pro-war candidate, and they are just now realizing that. And you know, just to back up for a second, conservatives use this weird political doublespeak where they say that you are pro-war if you support Ukraine's right to defend itself. That is not pro-war. That is pro-self-defense. And you'd think that conservatives would know a lot about self-defense, but no, being pro-war is not wanting Ukraine to be able to defend itself. Being pro-war is letting Netanyahu off of his leash completely, like Donald Trump is about to do. Being pro-war is allowing Putin to take Ukrainian land and basically rewarding him for it. That is pro-war. Donald Trump also hired John Bolton, hired Mike Pompeo and Gina Haspel, all insane neocon warmongers during his first term. He pardoned Blackwater war criminals. He signed a pro-torture executive order, and his first military raid as president killed a little American girl. Kyle Klinsky writes, "I haven't even included in this list what he says he wants in his second term. War with Mexico, allow Israel to annex the West Bank, stop listening to scam artists who don't know the first thing about policy and only care about vibes. With love, a guy who gives a shit about policy." And it's completely true. Do you guys remember when Donald Trump said he would have this war solved within 24 hours while he was still the president-elect? Listen to this.
"I would fix that within 24 hours. And if I win, before I get into the office, I will have that war settled."
He just said within 24 hours he will have it fixed. If he wins before he even gets into office, he'll have it fixed.
100% sure.
As president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, "You got to make a deal. This is crazy."
Oh, he's just going to say you got to make a deal. Why didn't President Biden think of that? That is genius. Well, this reads, "Putin aid quashes Donald Trump's pledge to end Ukraine war in 24 hours. This Putin aid came out and said, not happening. The Kremlin has batted off Donald Trump's view that he can end the war in Ukraine within a day as an exaggeration. Of course, Donald Trump is a salesman, and he ran with salesman-like tactics, saying he can end the war in 24 hours. The economy would bounce back. None of that is going to happen. I mean, they are going to do the mass deportation of 21 million illegal immigrants, as Donald Trump claims, and that will nuke the economy. That will effectively nuke the American economy. But Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov made the comment in response to a question about the U.S. president-elect's repeated claim that he could find a way to stop the war started by Moscow, quote, in 24 hours. It's just so incredibly naive. Quote, of course it was a kind of exaggeration when he said he would do it overnight, Peskov said, referring to Trump's claim, according to Russian state media. Now, Trump has insisted that he can make a deal swiftly to end the war, which will be nearly 3 years old when he takes office in January. He has not provided any details, although citing unnamed sources, the Wall Street Journal reported that one idea could see a delay to Kyiv's NATO membership for at least 20 years in exchange for continued arms supplies, which that is a complete win for Vladimir Putin. That means Ukraine had its sovereignty stripped away. Ukraine is not able to decide if it wants to join NATO or any other alliance. Ukraine's sovereignty was squashed not only by Russia, but by Donald Trump wanting to strike a deal so much, wanting to strike a deal so desperately. And this brings me on to Peter Schiff, who is a stockbroker and a financial analyst butting in on the Trump administration and the potential dangers of it. And he actually provided a very unique analysis that further proves Donald Trump is going to break just about every single promise that he made. So, Donald Trump said that he will establish a Bitcoin reserve, and this is what financial analyst Peter Schiff said in response. If the US government actually established a Bitcoin reserve and bought 1 million Bitcoin, it might end up buying millions more. Since the US government's purchase of 1 million Bitcoin would drive the price so high, many of the people holding or hanging on for dear life of Bitcoin, then worth millions of billions of dollars, would finally begin to cash out and spend their windfalls. That would cause the market to crash, forcing the US government to print even more dollars to buy even more Bitcoin to prevent the price from crashing more, thereby diminishing the value of its Bitcoin reserve. And of course, a reserve of something you can never actually sell and must continuously buy to stop it from tanking is worthless as a reserve. So to maintain the pretense that its Bitcoin reserve has actual value, the US government would be forced to keep buying, destroying the value of the dollar in the process. Here's where it gets wild. This would mean Bitcoin prices would keep rising, and the US government would have to print even more money to buy more Bitcoin. Ultimately, so many dollars would be printed to buy Bitcoin that the US would experience hyperinflation, rendering the dollar completely worthless. Once the dollar is worthless, the US could no longer keep buying Bitcoin. Instead, it would have to sell all the Bitcoin it holds to try to pay its bills, leading to the complete collapse of Bitcoin. In the end, Bitcoin would have succeeded in destroying the dollar, but the victory would be short-lived as Bitcoin would be destroyed along with it. At least those who sold to the US government to buy real assets would be rich, those Bitcoin people. The people who never sold their Bitcoin or kept their savings in dollars would be completely wiped out. And then at the very bottom, Peter Schiff writes, it goes without saying that this scenario would be an unmitigated disaster for the United States. That's why it's highly unlikely that a Bitcoin reserve will ever be established, let alone built up to the level suggested by RFK. And I think this post right here by a more level-headed, pragmatic analyst kind of summarizes the entire Trump administration. I mean, this Bitcoin promise is the Trump admin in a microcosm. Some wild promise that sounds so cool to young crypto bros. Oh, the US is going to have a Bitcoin reserve. That sounds great. But then when you think about it for one more second, you realize that might not be a good idea. Then when you contact actual analysts or people who know what they're talking about, they can lay out step by step why mass deportations would be terrible, why ceding Ukrainian land to Russia would be terrible, even if on the surface it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to the average RFK Jr. crypto bro. Who cares about Ukraine? No, there are dire consequences to the globe if we let Ukraine be taken by Russia. Oh, who cares if we slash EPA protections? No, there are actual consequences to these things that Peter Schiff lays out perfectly in regards to the Bitcoin reserve, at least. So the broader point here is, I guess we just have to see where things go with Trump's promises. Now, it seems like he's gearing up to actually try and deport 21 million people. Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, they seem serious about this, but is this just going to be another lie that he told and doesn't end up keeping, or is he going to go ahead with the most radical ideas while abandoning things like the Bitcoin reserve, which he has to abandon? I mean, if he actually goes through with the Bitcoin reserve, our country is cooked. The entire currency collapses and US loses its superpower status. I just don't see Trump doing this actual Bitcoin thing, but the mass deportation looks to be happening. We'll see. Like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.